Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. I hope all of you are feeling fresh and you all are ready to partake in a very, very spectacular, panel that is coming forth. The panel is titled "Caste and Psychology." It's a roundtable, and it doesn't need to be stated the importance of roundtable, historically how it is a very, very much needed space to discuss and foster more ideas. We have on our panel a very esteemed guest and Professor Meena Dhanda from Wolverhampton University, and she's also the chair at the London School of Economic and Political Science. She is a leading scholar on caste and identity, focusing on casteism as a form of racism. I do not need to give more introduction, especially after her very, very interesting keynote lecture yesterday, which talked about encountering social injustice. The talk made interconnections between different kind of inequalities across the world. I invite Professor Meena to please start the panel and introduce all our very esteemed speakers, some of whom have already spoken in the last 2 days. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you have recovered from the very sumptuous meal. And I know that it's always tempting to nod off for 5 minutes, snooze, but try not to do that because as a very strict teacher, I might call you off, tell you not to nod off when you're sitting here in front of this amazing lineup of people who have contributed to a special issue of J-CASTE. Tell me if you know about J-CASTE. It's a journal which comes from Brandeis University. I see a few nods. So Yashpal here has done the very enterprising thing of printing that special issue. There we are. And today we are going to revisit this special issue. And those of you who, like me, have not read the articles, I'm not ashamed to admit it's just something I didn't get around to doing. But I am here to introduce the people who have actually produced that issue. So like you, I'll be listening to them very honestly to know and learn from them what they have done in this special issue. But I must say I'm not ignorant about the topic because I had the honor of listening to Yashpal 2 years ago, I think, was it in Sweden, when he was articulating these very ideas in a workshop. So I have an idea of what Yashpal is doing. And at that point, I think this issue was in the making. And then it's come shortly after. So first of all, I must, on all our behalf, congratulate you for all of you, the authors, and you for producing this issue. So what we have here is ordered sequence, so in which I am going to introduce to you the people who will speak, and so that they also note when they are going to speak. So very quickly, first just the names, and I will quickly tell you who they are. So we have Roomana, Siddiqui, Arvind, Mishra, Angel, Sophan, and Divya, Dwivedi, Iram, Fatima, Suryodaya, Sharma, Vinod, Sharma, and Yashpal. So you've already met some of them. You've been introduced to some of them, but some you don't. So I'll introduce the ones that you do not know or may not know. So the first one is Roomana Siddiqui from Aligarh Muslim University. Roomana Siddiqui is a professor of psychology at Aligarh Muslim University. She received her PhD from the Center of Advanced Studies in Psychology, University of Allahabad. Now the name's changed, isn't it, of Allahabad? No, not of the university. I was just joking about the name of the city. She specializes in social psychology, and her research interests include environmental issues, intergroup harmony, and issues relating to social identity. I'll ask you to speak in a minute. So the way in which I propose we should do this is, each of you has about 3 or 4 minutes to share either a summary, if you want, of everything that you've done, or the most salient point, or what you want people to remember about your article. So tell us in 3 or 4 minutes, each one of you, in the order that I will speak. And then I want another round after that of the questions again, maybe in the reverse order in which we go first, in which I'd like you to say, since you wrote that article, and having by now hopefully read the works of other people, co-contributors in that article, in what sense you have thought of elaborating further your own work, or in what way, if it isn't in response to your co-contributors, in what other way you are developing the ideas that you have contributed here. So we can bring up to date, so to speak, the research that is being done on psychology and caste. So how's that? Okay? So another 3 minutes, 2 minutes each in a second round. That's how we do it. Okay, thank you. We are still people coming in. So I would request those who are coming in to please hurry up so that we do not disturb the speakers as they speak. So Roomana, you have the first go.
This opportunity. First, I would like to congratulate Dr. Yashpal for this compilation. And let me make a submission that I don't have an article in it, but I'll be doing the discussion on the basis of my reading of these papers.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So it was an interesting compilation because as researchers, somewhere caste we have always taken as a categorical variable or a demographic variable. So this compilation takes a very critical perspective of caste, because caste some way has not been taken up in psychological research and literature the way it should have been, because there is a group which is marginalized, dehumanized on the basis of their hierarchical placement in a society. So I think at the group level also we need to look into the phenomena, and that is what these papers, most of them which I have read, they are trying to do it. They are trying to locate where psychology has faltered and where psychology could make an inroad into the studying the various dynamics associated with the caste system. And one thing which I really liked in the beginning itself was that generally we take this term as if there's one caste, but here they have made it very clear that they are castes, because some way it has so synonymously got associated with the lower caste. That means caste means somewhere the lower caste, and there is a hierarchy involved, and the oppressor somewhere is missed out. Though the people who are oppressed, just because they are in juxtaposition of those who are at the top hierarchy. And so we have to take a lens, we have to focus the lens on both the oppressor as well as the oppressed. Naturally, the problem with caste is that since, as I told you, it becomes so synonymously associated with a particular group of people who have been, over the period of time, in a way, their identity has, I won't say genetically fixed, but generation after generation, the identity is so rigid and so fixated to a particular group that they don't have any opportunity to get out. And that is why the critical perspective is necessary, because there is a community where just because they are born in their community, so they have to face certain social, economic and political pressures or discrimination. And as a result, those people who are caught into it, they may be feeling suffocated and there's no voice as such. So in a way, we are discriminating, and psychology also, because I am from that perspective, from the discipline, so I'll be focusing on that only. So some way, I think we are responsible to a certain extent of reinforcing that status quo, because we have only taken a perspective from those who have been researched, and those who have not been, those voices which have not been paid attention to, they are just like a lost group, where we are using it only as an explanatory variable. So that I think we are doing injustice as a discipline. And 2-3 papers have raised this issue that some with the social psychological aspect of being born in a particular group, especially the group level phenomena has not been taken care of. So I think we need to overcome that, and especially the paper of Yashpal, he talks about, he does take the critical lens, and he has tried to analyze it from the social identity perspective, which to a certain extent does talk about the group level phenomena. So with this, I think I would like to pass on the mic to another speaker, and then we'll come back and discuss it. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, so we have next Arvind Mishra.
Yeah. Thank you.
May I introduce you? Arvind Mishra.
Okay.
Arvind Kumar Mishra is professor at the Zakir Hussain Center for Educational Studies. Sorry. Arvind Kumar Mishra is a professor at the Zakir Hussain Center for Educational Studies in the School of Social Sciences at JNU. He specializes in social psychology and is interested in exploring the intersections of politics, culture, ethics, and philosophy. He has contributed to the advancement of knowledge in the public policy division as well, and he's currently working on academic competence, theoretical psychology, and social psychology of collective action. Arvind.
Okay. Thank you. I'm thankful to organizer for including me in this roundtable discussion. I will echo Professor Roomana Siddiqui, who said that in discipline of psychology, caste has not been studied the way it should be studied. So almost it is a caste blind discipline. It used to be. So my training in psychology did not allow me or did not equip me to understand caste with all its complexity. But yeah, I'm thankful to Yashpal when he joined JNU and I got chance to work with him on caste. I started learning about caste, and then I started identifying also limitations and great limitations of the discipline. Basically philosophical assumption, ideological assumptions, and commitment. So my interest in critical psychology also grew along with my interest in understanding caste. We all know that those who are from psychology, I know here there are many who are not from psychology, it is a very individualistic discipline, and subject matter of psychology is individual. And conceptualization of individual in psychology is who is like isolated atoms and has no connection with history, society, politics, and culture. And that remains subject matter of psychology. So in one way, when we say that psychology of caste, it is oxymoron, because psychology and caste cannot go along. Unless we change the nature of psychology itself. So unless we redefine the nature of psyche, nature of mind, nature of individual human being, we cannot study caste the way it exists in society. So psychology has to take individual in its totality, who is embedded in history, politics, culture. So that's one suggestion. Another thing is that our training, in the first class itself, we are said that psychology is a scientific discipline, and this sentence is made with a sense of certainty that there is only one meaning of science, and everybody understands what do we mean by science. But after having some acquaintance with philosophy and history of science, I started realizing that there is no one kind of science, there are debates about science. So an important question is, if psychology at all is a scientific discipline, what philosophy of science it should adopt and deploy? That is it. But another thing is that, should we necessarily use scientific method and model of natural science? Or should we, because there was debate in the beginning of 20th century that psychology should use the model of humanities. And now we have a critical psychologist in York University, Thomas Teo, who has written an article from psychological science to psychological humanities. Because many questions, the model of science does not allow us to deal with or ask. So if we want to study psychology of caste, there has to be model of humanities. I'm not saying let us replace scientific model from psychology, but let us include along with scientific model. So model of humanity is very, very important. Another thing, the problem which I find that in psychology, there is tendency to specialize, and that specialization goes to the extent of becoming meaningless and very rigid. It's not only that psychologists do not integrate their findings, or they do not integrate other disciplines finding with their own discipline. Within the discipline, there is isolation. And not even within sub-discipline, there is isolation. Caste, if it is studied, mostly it is studied in social psychology. In social psychology, again, it would be some kind of technical thing, but we say there are two kinds of social psychology: psychological social psychology and sociological social psychology. And there is hardly any marriage between these two kinds of social psychology. And then we have European approach to social psychology. So this sociological social psychology and psychological social psychology are American tradition. And now we have European tradition, and there are very few attempts to bring them together and to have kind of dialogue. So if we want to have meaningful understanding of caste within the discipline of psychology, there has to be effort to bring the various dialogue, various tradition, various theories together. Three important theoretical tradition in social psychology: symbolic interactionism, social cognition, and social exchange theory. No, they are doing wonderful work in their own right, and they can benefit from one another, but they remain isolated from one another. So it cannot be done that. Okay. I will end, just a minute. I will end that we have to also, so I recall here one classic work by Habermas, which he published in 1971, Knowledge and Human Interest, where he says that there are three knowledge constituted human interest. In psychology, generally we rely upon empirical analytical approach, and according to Habermas, it is for prediction and for control. So we have to ask this question: when we want to study, we want to have some kind of control, or we want to predict something, or our goal is something. He said that the third knowledge constitutive interest which human being has, to achieve emancipation. So when we want to study caste, we have to learn from Habermas, especially the third. And now there are people, recently in Jaipur Literary Festival, Benki Ramaswamy said that the division, the C.P. Snow said, the two tradition, two culture of science and humanities, can there be marriage between science and humanities? So can we have a nuanced understanding of science which should not be antagonistic to humanities, but which should be very, there should be a complementary role. So there can be a new understanding of science which should embrace the insights from humanities also. Thank you.
Thank you. I could have predicted that you're going to overshoot, but I couldn't control you. Okay. Angel Sophan is our next contributor. She's a doctoral candidate at the School of Social Psychological Studies, Christ, deemed to be a university in Bangalore. You heard from her yesterday, so that's your short introduction.
Very good afternoon to one and all present here. I think I would like to just stress, I think what we are talking is the importance of caste in psychology. I am not trying to follow up with the theoretical notions of psychology and what does it traditionally do and how are we trying to strike a balance and try to do something different about it. I think for me, at least where I come from, the intersectionalities are too high. First of all, it's a private university. Second of all, caste as a topic never gets spoken about in any sphere. Thirdly, in psychology, no one talks about caste. So I would also like to ask others, at least fellow scholars, that how do we navigate this field? Because as much as knowledge production is important, for me, at least personally, it has been an extremely, extremely lonely journey. Lonely journey of not knowing whom to consult, not knowing whom to seek guidance from. I think for the first time, my life personally changed when I met Yashpal sir and everybody else in ISEC conference 2023. For me, first time in life, I felt a sense of community. For the first time, I didn't have to talk too loud to just be heard. Because I have seen, like for me, I think it is too just so hard for me to comprehend that how can we ever study individuals in a vacuum? How can you ever split them from things that are surrounding them? And for me personally, it has been a very, very fulfilling journey. Every time I go to class, every time I interact with psychology students, I usually handle master students, and I bring up caste. Like every class of mine will have caste, and it's so nice. It like there is this, like, the entire 60, the class of 60 is full of extremely elite people, and I understand when they talk about caste and counseling and psychology and how they are filled with superiority complex, savior complex. So for me at least, this has been my bit too.
Thank you, thank you. I think we are getting a very interesting set of comments from very different perspectives, and what we'll need to see. I like that you introduced the idea of asking your co-panelists to comment on what the difficulty found, and ideally it would be wonderful that if we had a conversation between you, and that the second round would be the opportunity to do so. So Divya Dwivedi, who you all know, is going to be our next contributor.
Thank you, Meena. And I want to thank Professor Yashpal Jogdand for including my contribution in this special issue. I think over almost 2-3 years, once I got to know that he was planning a special issue, I definitely suggested that there was something which had been obsessing me over a long period, and I wanted to tackle it. And there are numerous conversations under the tree outside Amul that we had in order to understand, how I could contribute, not being a psychologist. This gave me the opportunity to make two kinds of uses of psychoanalysis. The first was to simply consider the history of psychoanalysis in India. There is a history, and why in that history the topic of caste was missing. And the second was to criticize psychoanalysis for its various shortcomings in providing a revolutionary approach to mental suffering, to mental health, and to understanding civilization. Here also psychoanalysis stands out amongst various theories of society and of the psyche, because it is a theory of civilization, while it is also a theory of the clinic for therapy and for treatment. So my answer to the first question was that because caste must be practiced by remaining immune from those criticisms which have become louder, stronger, more convincing and more powerful over a period of 2-3 centuries. Therefore, caste has to be kept out of as many disciplines of humanities and social sciences as possible, because through these disciplines and through the university as the space of these disciplines for education and enlightenment, anti-caste consciousness can be also suppressed. So we talked in many sessions and many speakers addressed this immunity to caste in our knowledge production, in our epistemologies, and psychoanalysis in India is a victim of that. So prominent thinkers like Ashish Nandi, Sudhir Kakkar, some who have addressed caste in very minimal ways without seeing caste or showing caste as a system of oppression. So they have discussed psychoanalysis. They have, and many post-colonial scholars like Spivak are well known for their engagement with Lacanian psychoanalysis. And therefore, it appeared to me that we were dealing with a psychopathology. We were not simply dealing with a gatekeeping in the university, but with a psychopathology of gatekeeping, which is a form of resistance. And this led me to the second part of my inquiry, that till today, one of the strongest discourses of intellectual and emotional resistance is psychoanalysis. Although psychoanalysis has been discussed in the context of race very famously by Frantz Fanon, and Fanon was an inspiration for Indian post-colonialists, we are constantly astounded that the Indian post-colonialists or social scientists can be so selectively blind that they could read Fanon and they could speak about racism through Frantz Fanon. They are familiar with Octave Manoni, but they could not see or not permit any analogy between race-based oppression, which Fanon discussed, and caste-based oppression in India. And so in psychoanalysis, there are two concepts in Freud which I decided to explore, but critically, because I don't think some of the inherent flaws of psychoanalysis should be simply overlooked in order to apply it. So instead of applying psychoanalysis, I tried, and this is just the beginning of my effort, I tried to completely reorganize the psychoanalytical concepts of id, ego, and superego, superego being the most important, the one that controls our moral thinking and our rational thinking, to reorganize these three organs of our psyche in terms of our experience in India, for which I went to Baba Saheb Ambedkar's Annihilation of Caste. So if we acknowledge the reality of a caste-based civilization with its various prohibitions, privileges, and hierarchies, then how do we explain the emergence of a psyche and the emergence of the superego in the psyche? What is the moral thinking of the upper castes in such a civilization, and what can be the moral thinking of the oppressed in such a civilization? And it brought me to two concepts of Freud. One is Verneinung, or denial. We see a continuing tendency amongst the upper castes to deny something which they themselves practice and maintain. So the suppression of caste in all our discourses, in our media, this idea that there are problems in our society, but they are not due to caste. Professor Yashpal spoke about it yesterday as well. This is a psychopathology. You could even call it a mental illness of denying something which is obvious and materially true. And the second was that caste-based oppression is material. It is not merely a religious sanction, but it is socio-economic and material, and therefore it is bound to have psychological impact in the form of suffering amongst the oppressed. And psychology as a discipline has not adequately addressed it. My effort was to focus on the phenomena most close to me as an educator, which is the suicides in elite educational campuses, and to try and understand through a modified and critically modified psychoanalysis what form of melancholia can be seen in suicide. And my brief initial answer is that a society where caste is the moral imperative, caste is the superego of this society, such a society is going to lead to the modern psychopathology of melancholia, because it comes in conflict with the new modern anti-caste moral imperative of our constitution and of Dr. Ambedkar. So psychomachia, or the mental suffering, the suffering in the soul, is caused by the conflict of two antithetical moral imperatives. One, which is 3,000 years old, refuses to go away and is not acknowledged. And the other, which is our avowed moral commitment to equality, liberty, and fraternity. So long as this contradiction exists, our society, with its double moral imperatives, will continue to kill and cause psychomachia.
Thank you, thank you. That was lots of thoughts there, and thank you so much for summarizing, although you ran over time, but doesn't matter. So we've next got Iram Fatima. Iram Fatima is a PhD scholar at the Department of Humanities in IIT Delhi. Her research interests revolve around the intersection of social and political psychology, with a particular focus on topics like political activism, psychological resistance, collective action, and mobilization. Her PhD project looks at the processes of digital activism, resistance, and online collective action among the Dalit population in India.
Thank you for the introduction, ma'am, and good afternoon to all of you. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to share the stage with such eminent personalities. It really is a great honor for me to be here. Now, it is clear that caste is far from a thing of the past. And to understand the persistence of caste-based attitudes and biases, psychology can be of great help. Because psychology as a discipline, it offers valuable insights into why and how people think, feel, and behave the way they do. However, psychology itself hasn't always been free from biases, building on what Professor Arvind Mishra also said in the beginning. It has its own set of baggage. And these biases present challenges for the researchers who want to study caste from a psychological perspective. These challenges like what we believe, these challenges are in fact opportunities, and they do not mean that we should give up. Instead, they push us to rethink how we should mend our ways of doing psychological research on caste in a way which is more meaningful and relevant. So in this paper that we have published in J-CASTE along with my colleagues Maria and Rejoicen, this paper caters to those researchers who are new to studying caste from a psychological perspective. And we highlight some of the issues that are there in psychology in general and social psychology in particular that they should be aware of while doing research in psychology. So the idea is to make them aware of the potential pitfalls that are there and prevent them from falling into the same old traps. So what we do is we do not only highlight the problems, we also propose solutions. A lot of these issues, such as uncritical adoption of Western tools, methods, and theories to understand a system which is as complex as caste, can further marginalize the marginalized instead of empowering them. A lot of other issues are there that can happen right at the start when you're beginning to study caste from a psychological perspective. For example, an issue which is as simple as formulating research questions. So we vary researchers to be aware of their own identity position when they are studying caste, because it can influence how the research questions are being framed. And the uncritical adoption of Western theories and concepts for explaining caste-based inequalities in India. If they are not taken care of, if they are not approached with care, at the worst, they may end up justifying the caste-based inequalities. So in the next round of discussion, maybe I would like to elaborate on these issues. For now, this is a bit from my side. Thank you.
Wow. You're so good. Very good. Thank you for leaving some of what you want to say for the next round. That's perfect. Suryodaya, you're our next contributor. And Vinod will be the next one.
Okay. So I think there have been plenty of very insightful perspectives on what's happening when we are talking about caste in psychology, and more importantly, what's happening when psychologists are trying to talk about caste. So I think there is I would take a rather contrarian position to some extent, that starting with why is it that we even have to talk about caste within psychology? Why is it that psychology has to have some component, some part of this conversation has to be a stakeholder, not just a stakeholder, but a responsible one, aware of its own position and its own brand of knowledge that we offer? And some of it is the impact of psychology, that we all are psychologized subjects in certain ways. We think about ourselves, we describe ourselves, we talk about others, we talk about what's good, and more importantly, how we talk about pathology in the world. Who's smart, who's not, what kind of personality one has, what constitutes illness, what constitutes health, what constitutes criminality, what constitutes perhaps normality. And in these conversations, psychology comes out as the, if I wouldn't say it has the God claim yet, but it seems to have the certain hegemony, specifically talking about what constitutes pathology. And through this sheer capacity, somewhat of a dominance over talking about pathology, it has allowed certain bodies of knowledge to emerge. Some of the work that we have seen in stigma, the work that we have, Jogdand sir talks about humiliation. We see, if you're familiar with the Clark doll experiment and the impact it had on desegregation in USA. So psychology can play a certain responsible, accountable role. At the same time, I remember the time when I was starting this journey, I tried to find what is mind in Castes of Mind, the famous book that everybody referred to. And I could not find what was psychological about caste there. In fact, it seemed to be going in the opposite direction, which many caste deniers have now taken as a standard talking point in denying that the severity and the antiquity of caste in different ways. In fact, I would say the problem, some of it is the capacity to bring out differences between and among individuals that makes this a powerful discipline, a producer of knowledge, exporter of knowledge rather. And that also creates a certain problem. If the capacity is to diagnose one and to be able to locate normalcy, then that clinical approach also is subject to its own pathology in certain ways. And like for example, we have the idea of casteism. And how do you talk about casteism in psychology? Do we talk about it as some have talked about in the way child rearing practices work? Do we talk about it in the way people learn things? Do we talk about it in the way people see world in certain ways? And certain people are more vulnerable to prejudice, certain people are less. Then where are the questions of power? If we take up the questions of power on their own without the questions of psychology, how do we differentiate how do we locate the agency of the individual? How do we locate the change? What needs to change? And how is it that having a certain social position does not make all individuals the same? And in these small pockets, I would say there are important questions that psychology has important opportunity to answer these questions. Do we talk about prejudice as something that lies in individual mind? Is it something that lies as a shared code within the caste group? Is it something that comes from the macro ideological discursive practices and building blocks of our thinking? And if it's all of them, how do we integrate these seemingly disintegrated, disjunctured modes of knowledge and epistemologies? So I think these are some of the questions that I see and hope to take up further, and perhaps we can talk about it later.
Yes, thank you. I should have said when I passed the mic to Surya, Dr. Suryodaya Sharma has a PhD from Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at IIT Delhi, and he's a senior fellow with the University Grants Commission. We next have Vinod Mishra. Dr. Vinod Mishra is an assistant professor at the Indian Institute of Dalit Studies. His area of specialization includes urbanization and urban poverty, issues related to housing and residential segregation, rural-urban migration, health and demographic studies, evaluation of social protection programs, and issues related to social inclusion and social exclusion, and quantitative and qualitative research methods. He's the brain box. Okay, there we go.
Actually, I come from an institute where we do all this type of sort of study. But what I'm going to speak today is not as a faculty or director of Institute of Dalit Studies. I'm going to speak as an editor, one of the editor of J-CASTE journal. So I have privilege to work as a J-CASTE production editor last 5 years since inception of this journal. I really congratulate Professor Yashpal Jogdand, with whom I worked more than 1 year to compile, and also a different process, review process, everything in the production process. And also I'm lucky to meet some of the authors I was working virtually, and also worked with Professor Meena Dhanda in the earlier issues. So thank you very much for inviting, and really this special issue is really picking up quite well. And you know that our journal, which we started in 2020, just before the pandemic, it advances peer-reviewed scholarship across discipline. And also we look into the caste system in South Asia and also beyond it. And the main issue is to consider the marginalization and intergenerational operation of religious, racial, and cultural minorities throughout the world. So we keep publishing not only the issue of the caste in South Asia, but also the other oppressed communities across the globe, in different sections. We have a section of empirical research articles in which we receive more than 100 submissions in a year, which are really addressing a lot of issues of exclusion and discrimination by oppressed communities. And why we started this caste journal? Because we thought that there is a lack of platform for the scholars who are working on the issues of caste and exclusion. And you know that the exclusion in academia is also, if you work on the issues of caste discrimination and exclusion issues, so you will find very few places, particularly 5 to 10 years back. I'm also managing editor of another journal that is called Journal of Social Inclusion Studies, which come from the Sage publication. So these two journals, and also Professor Yashpal Jogdand is our real member in both the journals, we are trying to provide a platform to the young scholars like you who are engaging the question of caste and also through different interdisciplinary approaches. And both the journals are promoting nurturing young scholars who are writing on the issue of this important aspect. And we also provide a forum for informed, evidence-based debate and discussion on the issue related to social exclusion and discrimination as experienced by a person from marginalized social group. By publishing research on the relevant but neglected issues like concept of exclusion and also the application of caste concept and methods to empirical research, in J-CASTE we has had impact and also we opened up on various ways for the further research. And we have not done any systematic study, but what I'm seeing as the last 10 and 15 years, the impact of these two journals, that the number of scholars who are writing on this research increased significantly. And the other important issue of J-CASTE is that it's like open access journal in which like the download and others are free. So that helps like particularly the students and young scholars who cannot afford to buy costly articles. So they are reading, and also this also motivates in terms of methodologies and the concept we are using. In IIDS also, what we have already at Professor Mishra was saying that we should look into the interdisciplinary approach in terms of analyzing. So I'm not from caste psychology, so I'm not going to speak on this issue. But you know, the prejudice and the stereotypes are one of the important two aspects, which we have also been applying in other disciplines like sociology, economics. And because exclusion is not in one dimensional, it's a multidimensional in nature. So unless we study in multidimensional, it's like not only the exclusion, say in labor market participation or economic spheres, it will not be isolated. It's going to have impact on the social well-being, the health, and other psychological well-being of the person. So we always promote the interdisciplinary nature of the articles, and that's why the selection of articles also, we take care of that. We select such articles which is going to analyze the impact and also the consequences of the caste-based discrimination particularly. So not only the process we are trying to promote, but also the analysis, the empirical and systematic analysis of the consequences, adverse consequences of the caste discrimination. So thank you. We will come again next time.
Everybody's falling in line now. Good. Then we have now absolutely wonderful Yashpal Jogdand, dear to all of us, who is going to talk about his experience of compiling this fantastic volume.
First of all, I would like to thank two people, two great scholars who have really motivated and supported this whole endeavor to come to some fruition. First is Professor Sukhdev Thorat, who had the vision and understanding of seeing the why psychology needs to be at the forefront of addressing caste, and why caste needs to be at the center stage of psychology. So I'm really grateful to Professor Sukhdev Thorat for inviting me, despite being a young scholar and just starting out and building up these ideas. And I'm equally grateful to Professor Larry Simon in supporting the whole process and being very patient with queries. I was also a bit adamant on having certain things in certain way. So thank you so much for both of them, for bearing with me, to Dr. Mishra for supporting me throughout the editorial process, to all the authors who tolerated me in my persistent push that get it written up, revise, resubmit, said let's send it for review. So all of that, I think it's a collective endeavor. And when I say collective, I speak with the weight of the word collective. What is special about this special issue is that it's the first collective attempt to ask a psychological question regarding caste. Yes, it's not the case that there have not been any significant insights made into psychological dimensions of caste. And if you read the introduction I have written, I would say that it's a labor of love. It took me a while, and it gave me a hard time, even sleepless nights, to bring those things together. And I wanted to be a bit ambitious in proposing a way forward, that I wanted to write something that would, even after 50, 100 years, scholars, students will read and see that what was happening, what was being done, and what was the direction. Even if not much progress is made, the direction, at least I have got right. So I was doing that, and what you could see that it's not the case that there have never been these sort of insights, but they were all individual insights made by various sets of individual scholars in different periods. There has never been an integrative attempt. There has never been a collective attempt of bringing people together and making it a form of a collective action. That has never happened. So this special issue is special because it's the first collective attempt. The compilation is not just individual. In a sense, it cannot be divided into individual parts. As if you have studied psychology, you know what Gestalt psychologists have been saying: the whole is greater than sum of its parts. So it's a whole that has much more weight than what I, as an individual, could ever bring to the table. So where is it going? Where it is going? So as an editor of this volume, what I wanted to emphasize is that we have so much background building onto the anti-caste traditions, going back into the Buddha and subsequent philosophers like Ashwaghosh, Nagarjuna, Dhammakirti, that we have enough philosophical, scientific insight, also bringing into the psychological insights developed by Mahatma Phule and Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar. We have enough to develop a new field of inquiry, a new interdisciplinary field of inquiry called as critical psychology of caste. And as an editor, I won't like to speak much. I would like to listen what you want to say, because I'm reminded of what Saint Tukaram has said in one of his poems. He says that dile varya hati map tos taisa mai baap. Now you have scattered the seeds in the wind. Now the wind is going to decide what's going to happen with those seeds. So I'm not going to speak too much. I would like to listen from you whenever in your journeys you find that there are these questions that matter to me. Let me see what they have done. And if you find something useful and you take it on, I think I would really like to know. Second, as a student of psychology, I would just like to speak to you from a different identity position, not as an editor, but as a student to student. I have a question to ask you. How many of you have heard about self-esteem? Have used the word self-esteem? Have read the word self-esteem? Know the word self-esteem? Please raise your hand. All of you? All of you have heard about self-esteem? Okay. Somebody comes in and says, oh, you have low self-esteem. I'm sitting on a stage. I'm a psychologist. I come and say, you have low self-esteem. How are you going to feel? Bad. Second, you have to, in a sense, you will be trapped in that dynamic where an authority is coming and making a judgment on you. But note, this judgment is a psychological judgment. The concept that is used to make this judgment on you is a psychological concept. And this is what I was very affected by. That how can somebody comes in and write in a paper published in a sub-journal in the West, going all over the world, writes that Dalits have low self-esteem. How can you come to that judgment? Don't you understand what it is rooted in? What is the responsibility of being a psychologist? What is the moral, ethical responsibility of being a psychologist? What does it mean? As Professor Mishra has rightly pointed out, what is the meaning of doing science then? And if you look into history of psychology, you see that psychologists, and it's quite shameful history. Look into what psychologists have done with the construct of intelligence. Very shameful. Construct of intelligence is used to impose, legitimize, expand racial ideas, even today. Even today. On the other hand, you find that the dynamic is so intense that American Psychological Association, I hope most of you have heard, at least use the citation style, no? So, has issued a public apology to people of color for harming them through our science. And on that public apology, Association of Black Psychologists says, don't pretend. Don't fool us again. This is the dynamic that is happening at the moment. How it is reflected in our context. Let's talk students to student. What is our responsibility then in understanding? You don't have to be psychologist to be affected by anybody's comment on any psychological aspect of your individual or group life. So this is the power of psychology, and I see psychology as a form of power relation. But power relations cut both ways. If psychological ideas can be used to oppress people, and we have been hearing about work of people like Ambedkar, people like Franz Fanon, people like Sartre, and so many, we know that psychological ideas could be used for liberation, for empowerment, for annihilation of caste, race, racism, or any other forms of inequality and oppression around the world. So this is the intent, this is the emotion that led me to do this work. I'll stop here.
Thank you. Excellent. I think I'm going to go back to Iram, since you said that you will continue in the second round. And I think Angel had asked a question about how you can help people in her situation who felt very isolated in doing her work. Anyone can answer that. And Surya also wanted to continue, and Purnima, I think you also paused in the beginning quite in time, and you would want to say, I think. And I think for the others, I will give a pause, and we'll see if we have time. I'll come to you. Okay.
Thank you so much. Building on what Dr. Yashpal just talked about, studies that have published these results that Dalits have lower self-esteem. There are a lot of studies that compare different caste groups, and they make generalized like conclusions that this particular group is low in self-esteem, or it has different personality traits, and they have different economic behaviors. One of the consequences of these assumptions, or these misconceived results, is treating caste as a demographic variable in studies, as Professor Roomana Siddiqui also mentioned in the beginning. So if you treat caste as a demographic variable, you run the risk of simplifying the, you run the risk of essentialism. Now, what is essentialism? It is the belief that the differences between social groups are natural or unchangeable. So if you believe in essentialism, you believe that these differences are even, justified. So you try to legitimize these differences. Also, when you treat caste as a demographic variable, what you do is you miss on important details, because when a person is, let me put it this way, when a person is born into a particular caste category, it is just the person who is born and not the caste. Caste has always been there. So there is a burden that comes attached with that particular identity, and the burden of which the person has to bear. The caste is going to shape their life experiences, the way they develop their self-esteem, and all these things. So a way out that we also proposed in our paper that we have published here is you should operationalize caste very carefully when you are using it in your study, especially if you are using it in a survey design. What researchers usually do, they simply report the differences between groups as any other demographic variable like age, gender, socioeconomic status. However, one should keep in mind that caste is not a hollow social category. It is a meaningful and relevant social category that shapes people's experiences, life experiences. So one should operationalize caste very carefully when you're doing any study. And one way is to let the participants themselves decide how do they define caste identity. Another important consideration is when you are reporting your results. So beyond just reporting the simple statistical or significance difference between groups, you should take into consideration the larger socio-political and historical context from which these differences are coming from. So these are simple ways through which you can handle, you can not only save yourself from going into the wrong path, but also do a psychological research on caste, which is actually empowering for the participants, which is actually relevant and meaningful in today's time.
Thank you. May I introduce the idea that Surya actually raised, which was about you might want to study practices of child rearing, right? So you talked about being born being ascribed a caste at birth, but between that and becoming an adult person, there's this whole process of being brought up in one way or another. And so what might be the role of studying practices of child rearing in reproducing caste? So mostly in anthropology and in sociology, we are looking at adult human beings. And I think if it's child psychology is an area where it might be quite interesting to find out about what are the manners in which caste is reproduced. People look at school curriculum sometimes, so in education is one area also where you can see how stories and narratives about caste are reproduced, and all sorts of biases. And as is done in other cases on education about gender, for example, or race, we look at similar pattern. So I don't know if there is work on that already. I know, of course, Kakkar's book on Indian childhood. I've read that work, and I don't also recall anything about caste in that book. And that's the point you made. So it would be interesting if there were, and if you know of studies which look at child rearing. So you want to take it up, or anybody else who knows about it would be good.
Just a quick comment on the demographic aspect of caste. I remember when we were research scholars and we were discussing paper publication and all. So our professor was trying to help us understand how papers get rejected. And he says, one of my papers got a very harsh comment because I had used the demography of caste and the Western world didn't understand what caste was all about. So, you know, when a benchmark are those journals where they don't understand these categories. So, the pressure of publication basically leads to, I think, sidelining these issues. No? So, I think I just wanted to make a comment because the moment we use, we use it as a demographic variable, and when we feel, okay, it's not publishable in those high impactful journals, then very gradually we just lose content. So, in this way, I think J-CASTE is doing a great service for highlighting that issue.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. That's a great point. And I think it coheres with what we were discussing in the earlier sessions before and also yesterday about the importance of a global conversation. So if caste is taken out of ancient history textbooks or the concern of a very limited group of anthropologists, even among anthropologists, not like all anthropologists know about caste, some do. So it's, if it becomes a part of the vocabulary of various academic disciplines, so sociology, etc., and is taken out of the very niche areas in which it is discussed and is as commonly used as, for example, race is used, then you wouldn't have the problem that you now have of talking about caste in a manner that somebody in another part of the world who hasn't personally experienced it can still follow what you're saying. Yeah, and I think that's, again, a reason for globalizing the discussion. So who wants to go next? You want to?
Yeah. If I can just add onto that, to what ma'am asked of if Kakkar has ever spoken on caste. Indian psychology, I'm so glad to be just telling it loud. Indian psychology is extremely Brahmanical. It's as Brahmanical as something can be. Indian psychology loves it, loves to talk about such beautiful aspects of India. Vedicness, Sufism, Buddhism, Ayurveda, yoga, like, oh my God, you will love in India. You will fall in love with India. Like, it does not want to talk about anything else. Any Indian psychology textbook, pick anything of your choice, press Ctrl plus F, put caste, 3 will come, 3 or 2 maximum. And what is it? They would have done some 1960s or 1971 study, used it as a demographic variable. Dalits have low self-esteem, great finding, call it a day. That's the greatest knowledge production Indian psychology has at least done. There is this one book of Kakkar. I can't remember the name. He's just talking about Hindu identity formation. So of course, let's forget about Christians and Muslims being part of India. So he talks about Erik Erikson's, I hope the psychology students at least would know the Erik Erikson's identity development, adolescence, adulthood, etc. That he has compared it to the Hindu identity formation. And in that Hindu identity formation, it's that identity formation would apply only to a male Brahmin child, because at certain age the Upanayanam, that's the, so for say, he's comparing that Upanayanam, the in Hindi I think Jannayu, the sacred thread, that to one Erik Erikson's stage of development, and he's just talking about we already had these things. So it is as exclusionary as a discipline as it can be, and I'm just glad to just tell it out loud once. It was a big burden, so I at least urge the upcoming psychology scholars that, for me, ever since I started my journey, every day, there's not been one day where people don't ask me, Angel, what are you doing in psychology? If you want to talk about caste, go to social work, go to sociology. No, because there's no conversation or dialogue happening in this discipline, you stay only in this discipline. You adamantly stay in this discipline. You go against everyone you have to go. You do your work diligently, but everything you read very, very critically. Is your life being part of that textbook? No. Is your country's life, is your community's life, is your grandparent, nothing is being part of the textbook. So please be in that discipline to make the change. I genuinely urge and hope that we all speak about caste.
Yeah, I just want to share that in 2015, there was I think it was 2015, there was a conference in UCL, which was outcome of a project which was led by Professor Suryodaya Jadhav, who's a cultural psychiatrist who teaches in UCL in London as well as works for the NHS. And he works amongst the homeless and the mental health issues that the homeless suffer. And I had the also opportunity to speak at that conference. It was called, the day conference, it was called Minds of Caste. And it was about experiences to do with trauma of various kinds. And so I had shared a story there. I won't go into it again, but if people want to look, the recording of that is there online. And so there are about 10 or so contributions on that day, and they are, so if you search for Suryodaya Jadhav Minds of Caste, you should be able to find it. And he's currently also engaged in a project, and he comes to India for research. So I would think that his is a quite unique attempt within psychiatry to bring in the question and to discuss the question of caste. And he has systematically and for a long time followed it. But it's a scale because of the nature of the work. It is working with one individual at a time, and it's working with a handful of individuals. But the kind of research that you are discussing here is of developing maybe theoretical tools or ways of studying behavior, human behavior, which should have a much wider application. And that is quite a challenge to devise. And I think there's another person in the UK who has done some work also on caste and identity, but it's something he did just one off, and I don't think he's ever followed it up. It's a study he did with a small group of people, and he's just left it to go on to something else. So but that's also, I think, something we have to bear in mind, that sometimes people do research on caste not because they see it as a problem that has to be systematically addressed in a long program of research. They do it because it is an immediate occasion to maybe attend a conference, present a paper somewhere or something, and just do it and forget about it. And I don't think it's probably better that such work doesn't get done. So if you want to be involved in doing research on caste, then I think it has to be a really long-term commitment, and it has to be done in stages, and you have to allow yourself to grow through it and maybe even correct yourself in the process of doing it. I mean, even have the opportunity to reject what you did some years ago because you learned something better, or you've learned a different way. So I think this itself is a matter of, for psychology, I think, about the mental health of researchers on caste. How they should be doing research on caste, because we can maybe excuse sociologists of not doing work on caste in a self-reflexive way. But I think psychologists, philosophers, they just have that responsibility to do it in a self-reflexive way because of the nature of their discipline, right? Yeah, sorry. So who's going to go next? Yes.
So I would be responding to also some of the comment made by the speaker here, and something which I could not say in first round. Psychology as a discipline is conventionally looked at as a discipline that talks about mental health and that helps people to gain mental health and maintain mental health. I would like to speak that what do we understand by mental health? One definition of mental health that comes from American Psychiatric Association's DSM-5. So that is one meaning of mental health. But I like to learn about mental health from one book by Erich Fromm, which he writes, Marx's Concept of Man. And in this book, Erich Fromm says that Marx is one of the most misunderstood philosophers in the world, his beginning sentence. And he says that Marx is only understood that his economic analysis, but basically his most salient concept was alienation. And because of alienation, human being loses their humanness. If I think we lose our humanness, we are not mentally healthy. He was talking about, he was referring to Marx, and Marx analysis we know was in the context of capitalism. But if we bring that framework in the Indian context, and Dalits who are Bahujan, and if they are excluded, not only sociologically but psychologically, no, they are not part of the self. Here, although Erik Erikson you have critiqued, but one concept of Erik Erikson is very useful. When he talks about differentiate between totalitarian self and holistic self, he says that in totalitarian self, the boundary is very rigid. You do not allow others to come inside. Whereas in holistic self, boundary is permeable, and distinction between self and other is not very tightly defined. So if in Indian society as a whole has to gain mental health, I think exclusion is anathema to that. So as long as there is exclusion, Indian society is not mentally healthy. And we can become healthy only when we have a holistic self and not totalitarian self. Currently, it is a totalitarian self. Yes, and about psychoanalysis, you have said very rightly. I have also tried to write about it. No, psychoanalysis is not one discipline, let me know. In England, it is used in another way. In America, it is used in most disgusting manner. Most. Even during the lifetime of Freud, when he said that psychoanalysis should not be made part of medicine, it was incorporated into the medicine during his lifetime. The most emancipatory use of psychoanalysis is in Latin America. And there are even current generation of psychologists, very bright psychologists, and they are using, we have no, liberatory psychology. And that psychology, unfortunately, is completely missing in Indian curriculum. There is no textbook, no names. We do not know name of any Latin American psychologist. So psychoanalysis, and some people say about Ashish Nandi, he uses psychoanalytic mode of revolt to question subjectivity, identity, and culture. So when you are talking about Indian culture and you expressing your displeasure about that, because we are too uncritical about Indian society and Indian culture. When we use the psychoanalytic mode of revolt, we can puncture that certainty, that nicety, the wholeness. It is not there. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you. That's all fantastic contributions coming. Surya, you wanted to? Or we pass you. Vinod, you want to complete? Okay, I think we should use some time to ask. Yes, we should have questions from comments or questions to any one person or anybody or broadly that you want. So we've got one hand there, one hand there.
Hello. So my question is related to the concept of learned helplessness, which is in psychology. And it is often used as a mode to just tell people that you are responsible for your own destitute and you have learned this from your own environment, and that's why. So during a class of psychology, we had this concept of learned helplessness, and they were telling us how like oppressed castes are oppressed because they have this learned helplessness which they have acquired. So like how, like, has there any kind of change that has been there to like critique on this concept? Because I find it very derogatory to just blame someone for their own like situation. And
Yeah, okay.
another question I had was with Divya ma'am. So like the Fanon, when I was reading Fanon, I was able to see the parallel between how even though Fanon wrote about Africa, I was still able to see the similarities in India about the native and the intellectuals and how there is a negotiation between the colonizers, between them. But you said it very correctly that when it comes to the Indian context, there are so many people who quote Fanon, but they have never returned those parallel on it. See,
Hello, ma'am. First of all, I would like to correct. Hello, ma'am. My name is Kumar Jitu. First of all, I would like to correct Professor Divya Dwivedi. Caste is not a super ego for all in the society, but it is only for Brahmin, Baniya, Kshatriya. It is not for Dalit Bahujan. So I don't have any specific kind of question, but I would like to a question, what is the future of caste? Can it annihilate in future or not like a race? You all are intellectual. Do you have any solution to annihilate the caste except Ambedkar's idea of annihilation of caste?
I was going to, in relation to the remarks that psychology is an individualistic discipline, Fanon, I think, made the same complaint, and he was understanding himself to be doing institutional psychiatry, so basically studying the cultural impositions. So people, of course, are affected individually, but the reason they have such and such effects because institutions are structured and the society is structured by cultural impositions. So he was heading in that direction already, and that's what I wanted to add.
Okay.
I also have a question.
I think we'll take 4. We'll come to you in a minute. Yeah. Okay. So who wants to answer?
I do not know your name, but thank you for your question on learned helplessness given by Martin Seligman. And now he has started a new discipline, a sub-discipline called positive psychology, and which has unfortunately become very popular among psychologists. And I say there is hardly anything positive about positive psychology. No, because Seligman continues to be an individualistic psychologist. His focus, subject of his study is isolated, asocial, ahistorical, apolitical individual. So the problem which we had regarding learned helplessness, it is like blaming the victim. No? So by this concept, we are saying that. And in discipline of psychology, and one of my students has written also about that, there is a conformity bias. Psychologists only like to highlight the instances where human being conform to the dominant norm. And we have a very classic experiment in social psychology by Solomon Asch. And in that experiment, he got evidence in favor of or in support of conformity that was around 66%, but 32 or 33% were instances that was showing resistance. And original title of original paper was a study in independence and conformity. But very smartly, our textbook writer concealed the independence aspect and highlighted, and most of the psychology students know, Solomon Asch's study on conformity. Whereas his ideological commitment was, because that classic study was conducted in the backdrop of Second World War. And he was probing this question, how come so many educated people, so-called civilized people, participated in a human act? Why did they conform? Something that was bad. So he wanted to know, can people be independent? Can they defy some kind of group pressure? But just see the ideological nature of psychology textbook and dominant discourse, which has distorted the finding of original research. Okay? So if we take structure, all the psychologists are saying that psychology is an individualistic discipline. There is a gross neglect of social structure. We do not have, even in social psychology, which has this adjective social, there is no proper definition of social, There is no attempt on the part of social psychologists to define what society is. And not only that, they do not even borrow from sociologists like Durkheim or Marx, who have tried to define and conceptualize society. So in this kind of discipline, you cannot expect anything except learned helplessness kind of thing. That is a pathetic situation of the discipline.
So what Sir just mentioned, this work on David McClelland's research that they borrowed from, was it Weber's work on the relationship between the Protestant ethics and rise of capitalism. They found it very interesting, came up with this idea of need for motivation, need for achievement, and was it need for power? And what they ended up finding that societies where the societies that are poor, lower on per capita GDP, they also have lower per capita, lower need for motivation, need for power, and need for achievement. So you see how we reverse engineer things into a completely different and somehow, in fact, they did one study like that in 1950s in India. And they found the same, that India is, again, you can explain the poverty because Indians have low need for achievement. So again, why some of these research studies, they should be taken with a pinch of caution. And in fact, to be more technical than that, the experiment by Seligman, it was less to do initially with the well-being level rather than looking at the escape conditioning. Rather something more technical, more trivial, but since it got a lot of traction, it assumed a certain cultural phenomena, something of a meme, and then got misinterpreted into things the way it should not have. And that actually is true is a lot of other aspects of what you would know about social psychology, for example, Stanford Prison Experiment and so on. Which again, coming back to the thing about critical psychology of caste, it is not just about being critical of the discipline, but also being critical of the people who are in the subject position of a psychologist, or they who would be willing to.
Thank you so much. I'm really mindful of time. Can we take just 3 or 4 minutes because we started a little bit late? But
so I give a short answer to.
Yeah, we should because we should try and finish at 3:40. I think. Yeah.
A little earlier because 3:45 is the keynote with Etienne Balevar.
So
yeah,
that
so
we are already 3:35. So
yeah.
Unless somebody, so I'm sorry. There are 3 questions waiting, and there's we can hear the question. There was somebody who wanted to ask a question. Yeah, we can hear the question, but please keep it brief, huh? No, not a comment, a question. Maybe I can take it outside. Yeah, that's even better. Thank you. And the others who did ask a question, I think, can we urge that you talk with the speakers afterwards? And is that, should I? Okay. So. Does anyone want to take that?
Yeah, I'll answer briefly since it was. So thank you very much. I think I do agree with you that caste as the superego of the oppressed people of the caste system, that is not a straightforward blanket generalization. At the same time, since I am at the initial stages of this reflection and this research, and I depend entirely on always finite number of articulations by writers or by people writing memoirs, autobiographies, even poems like Namdev Dasal, that was one short part of my paper. Since I depend on their testimonies, there is definitely a different, very asymmetric way in which it's not entirely false that caste, that is to say following and repeating caste, is a kind of superego, but it has very different impact within the psyche because of its interaction with the rest of aspects of our psychosomatic makeup. And the brief illustration I can give is a very haunting statement by a recent suicide, a young girl who killed herself in a coaching center, and in her suicide note, she wrote this word, "Sorry, Mama, Papa, I am the worst daughter." So this is not new. We know in many, many cases, different kinds of suffering in educational institutes, that meritocracy of caste system, it imposes a sense of inferiority, but it does not mean it is unambivalent. And I think that's why the remarks that are made about self-esteem are, for me, now this, to answer Meena about what do I want to do next, I think I want to engage more deeply with exactly this dynamic that Yashpal pointed out. Somewhere the caste system interpellates its own victims. And it may be doing that through a superego, which is not the only superego. That was my point, but I can elaborate further on it. And I think if we don't recognize it as at least some truth, part of the truth of the way moral imperatives function, the imperative to believe in one's own inferiority. It is completely external, but it does get internalized sometimes. Then maybe we may not be able to understand some of the psychic damage done by caste. And alienation, since it was mentioned, and it was also developed, in as Zainab also said, by Fanon. I think alienation is always a dynamic between two half-impactful ideas. And I don't think I can answer the other question about how to annihilate caste, but I think we all have some answers. And we need to have another conference on it.
Yes, that's, we must talk, we can talk about it outside as well. And I'm sure that there is no one answer that is suitable for the different sorts of struggles that people are involved in responding to casteism. But on psychology, I'll quickly say that at least there's one result from psychological research which is found use in caste studies, and that's the research on implicit bias, and that originated from psychology, but we are finding it being used in other areas, as in the bias that employers use in hiring candidates from this or that caste group. So there is a direct use that you can make of, you know, research in psychology in other areas as well related to caste. So shall we end there, and a hand of applause for, you know, for the Thank you all, and we should quickly take our comfort break and come back for the last. Yeah. So literally, you've got 6 minutes to be out and back in.
Or should we open wide open? Because there is a queue. There is a queue.
You are right. This is important feedback for organizers. Architecture means also.
Okay. So I welcome you all to the second